Hi, my name is Esperanza Zenon. I'm a professor of physical science at River Parishes Community College in Gonzales, Louisiana. Thank you for joining me today. I'll be talking about how you can increase equity for your students in STEM and tech courses by utilizing open education resources, OER. So I'll be covering a bit of background regarding textbooks. I'll share some open education resources that you can use to support your technical and STEM courses. And then I'll talk about how you can get involved in this OER movement. So I don't think I have to tell anybody that the cost of textbooks are ridiculous today. Over the course of the past 30 years or so, the price of textbooks has gone up by, according to this study, 1,041%. That is a tremendous increase. Textbooks cost so much these days that students are having to make choices about whether they can afford to purchase the books that they need for their classes. So students cope with this dilemma, the cost of textbooks, in a number of ways. Sometimes they purchase an older edition of a textbook. Sometimes they delay purchasing the textbook. In many cases, that is because they're waiting on some type of financial assistance through their institution. Some never purchase the textbook. Some share textbooks with other students. And then sometimes students resort to some other tactics, many that involve copyright violations, to get access to the textbook. But any of these choices, any of these ways that students cope with the cost of textbooks, means that they don't typically have the textbook that they need when the class starts, which impacts their success and the learning experience that they have. And so to foster equity, one of the things that I do and many faculty across the country do is utilize what we call open education materials. Materials that are free to use, free to modify, free to share, free to print, free to download, free. And that's very, very important to students. When we reduce the cost of textbooks, this equates to equity. We level the playing field. We meet students where they have a need. Now, in my institution, River Parishes Community College, we're what we call a minority serving institution. And in many cases, that translates into a large percentage of students on financial aid. And so many times, because they're on financial aid, they don't have funds readily available at the start of classes to purchase textbooks. And again, that means there's a delay in their access and use of the textbook, which in many cases is one of the key learning tools that they need. Now, what we found is that when we reduce the cost of textbooks by using open, free materials, they take more courses. They have more money, so they can increase the number of courses that they can take. It reduces their matriculation time, meaning they're not with us as long. It means that there are funds available for other needs. They don't have to decide whether they're going to purchase a textbook or purchase food, which is a real scenario for many students. All of these things mean what? They can graduate sooner. They can go to work sooner. And that means by reducing the cost of textbooks, by trying to foster equity in the courses, we create real life opportunities for many students. So now I'll just share with you some of the open resources that I've used to build technical courses. I'm not a technical faculty member. I'm an academic faculty member. But I've developed the capability and the skills of building courses like an instructional designer would. And so I've learned to curate these open materials, and I'm going to share with you some of the sources and places that I find open materials. So here's an excellent open resource for drafting. It's the 3rd edition, Pipe Drafting and Design by Roy A. Parasher. So he created this resource, this textbook, and he made it freely available to anyone who wants to use it. So this book supports, at our institution, the Advanced Drafting and Discipline courses. Day one, students have full access to the textbook at no cost. So that means they're able to experience the same learning experience that every other student experiences, even if they have financial difficulties. Of course, beyond the cost factor, there are some benefits to utilizing an open textbook. It's downloadable. You notice, for example, this textbook has a full PDF option, meaning you can download the full textbook. It's printable, and we have a vendor that we typically send students out to, where they can get a textbook like this printed for about $10. So that substantially reduces the cost of the textbook, and that's if they want a printable version. They can definitely read it and access it anywhere, and that's definitely a benefit of utilizing open resources. The other benefit on the faculty side of the house is that you can modify this textbook, meaning you can pick and choose what you want to use to create the learning experience and environment that you want your students to have. Here's another open resource that I found to support drafting classes: the Hitchhiker's Guide. It's free. It's dealing with AutoCAD. You go out to this website. There's a lot of step-by-step tutorials. There's learning videos. There's pictures. There's even discussion forums that the student can utilize to share information with other folk who are using this resource. And then there's a tips section where they give you some guidance on the best way to utilize the tool. In-house drawings have proven to be a valuable free resource that we provide to our students. So our drafting instructors got together and created open education materials. So they have created these drawings. They make them freely available to the students. Not to mention any faculty member anywhere who wants access to them, they'll freely share them. There's a Creative Commons license attached to these materials that say we will share this with anybody who wants it. And you can take it and do whatever you want to do, modify it, or incorporate it into a learning activity any way you see fit. Here's another source for open materials to support technical courses. And I provided the website here for you. You see it comes with a Creative Commons license. It says what? Each simulation can be embedded into your online courses or used in the classroom. Use, modify, or share for free under this Creative Commons license. So that gives you a lot of flexibility in terms of how you use this material. This is engineering focused, but they have some great resources on automation and robotics, electrical and motor controls, process control, or renewable energy. And those are areas that a great many students in technical programs have to take. Wisconsin Technical College also has an excellent repository of open materials. And you can see on the left menu here, they have some arts and humanities materials, career cluster materials. But what I'm most interested in for this portion of the presentation is the manufacturing and engineering resources that they have available. So let's take a little deeper dive into those materials. So if you look, you can see there's electronics, industrial automation, machine tool, welding materials available. Free, openly licensed material that you can use to support these content areas. So I took a even deeper dive to show you some of the welding resources that they have. And these resources are typically some type of video or tutorial followed by an activity. So you can see here, I'm not a welder, but these are some of the kinds of welding instructional materials that they provided. So something about power sources for gas metal arc welding. If this is a topic area that you want to cover with your students, here is some free material that you can incorporate in your class. Remember, the idea is what? We reduce the cost of materials by using these openly licensed and free resources. Here's a snapshot of the materials for industrial automation. So again, I'm not a faculty member in this area, but what I do when I'm building an open online course for a faculty member in the technical area, technical disciplines, I work with them to find out what kind of topics they cover, and then I go and I curate the content. And so what I'm sharing with you are the resources and tools that I use to curate and put together an online and open course that students can engage in. "180 Skills" is another excellent source for materials. Now, for our students, this is free material that they can use because our college, our system, in fact, has paid for what we call a system-wide license. So our students can use this material without cost. Faculty members can utilize it without cost. And so while there is a cost to the system, and so technically this is not open material, but it's an excellent source for materials where students don't have to worry about the cost involved because it's paid for at a much higher level than what they're having to deal with. Skills Commons is another excellent source for free and open materials that deal with workforce training. And so Skills Commons is was created and generated by an organization called Merlot, which I'll share a brief bit about here shortly. But this is, a referatory, meaning Skills Commons doesn't house the actual material, but they can link you out to resources that are open that support workforce training, and you can get to those materials simply by doing a search for whatever topic area you're interested in, and it'll spit back to you all that it has related to that industry credential or material. So here is a listing of some open resources that I use to support my STEM courses and technical courses, believe it or not, because technical courses have a lot of STEM embedded. And what I typically do is I utilize these resources to create learning modules that can be embedded in the technical courses to facilitate remediation or review. So the Open Textbook Library has a large collection of free, openly licensed textbooks. Textbooks for every student that they can afford. And so you see, you can browse the library by subject, or you can just browse in general. I should mention that this Open Textbook Library is a product created by the University of Minnesota. Let me make sure I give them credit. Merlot, I mentioned them a moment ago as the creators of the Skills Commons repository, referatory, if you will. And so I utilize them not just for their Skills Commons resources, but for their resources in general that can support my own STEM courses, and then again to provide materials for remediation in the technical areas. For example, under a grant project just last month, I utilized a lot of medical assistant resources that Merlot had available to design learning modules for our medical assistant program. CK12 has a great collection of college, what they call FlexBooks, and you can see some of the areas that they support. They have a lot of kind of tutorial resources embedded in these textbooks that I find are very useful to students. For example, students might need to do some math remediation as part of a technical course, and so I've utilized these resources to create those learning opportunities for students. Cool for Ed is another source for open materials, California Open Online Library for Education. The thing I like about Cool for Ed, and I should say about the Open Textbook Library and Merlot and Skills Commons, just like Cool for Ed, those materials are peer-reviewed, meaning folk who have the credential take a look at those materials and rate them according to a set of criteria. And so that can give some assurance that these materials have been reviewed and tested, if you will, for quality. BC Campus is what I find one of the more complete collections of open materials, open textbooks. You see the subjects listed there, but they've recently added a category for that to support workforce training. In fact, I utilize some of their materials here recently to design learning modules for millwright and HVAC classes. So they have an excellent collection of materials to support STEM education and technical education. And again, all free. Open Washington is another consortium that provides open OER materials. And then the Old Faithful, I like to say in many ways, one of the organizations that's been around for quite some time, providing 100% free textbooks to students, and that is OpenStax. And so you can see the disciplines that are supported by OpenStax. So they have a wonderful collection of textbooks to support STEM education. And again, I use their resources in my own physical science and physics courses, but I also use portions of textbooks to support my technical courses. I happen to teach a fluid mechanics course, which is part of our process technology program, and I utilize 2 or 3 chapters out of their college and university physics textbooks to do so. FET is another source for simulations that can support science and math, and they're all free, and they come with some learning materials, learning activities that are already created. You can take them and modify them to your liking and incorporate them in your courses. I use just about all of their physics simulations in my own physics and physical science classes, but there are some great simulations out there that I use in my fluid mechanics class as well. And I've shared this with the great Walter Fent physics apps. I've been utilizing these simulations by Walter Fent since about 2001. They're freely available. You see there are multiple languages, and with these apps, they've moved from being primarily Java based to now being HTML5 based, which means they run right in the student's browser with no additional security permissions required. Now, you do have to build your own learning activities to support these simulations, but I have a collection of learning activities that I've built. Anybody who wants to have access to them, I'm more than willing to share them under a Creative Commons license, and you can do whatever you like with it. Don't hesitate to reach out to me. Sailor.org is another source for open materials. You can see a listing of some of the topic areas that they cover. I've utilized an item or two to support my physics classes from them. And then there are some other resources that I utilize to support my courses. So the first one I'll share is through Open Washington. Not only do they have a good repository of open materials, but I love their attribution builder. whenever you utilize an open education resource and it has a Creative Commons license associated with it, you must give attribution for that resource. So just like you have to have a reference page or a bibliography to give credit for the sources that you might use in a paper or even in your courses, you have to give attribution whenever you use an open education resource. So you have to say what license this material was adopted under, because that tells everybody what terms you are using that resource under, what Creative Commons license was attached to that material, and that tells everybody what you're allowed to do with it. Pave is a wonderful tool because it allows you to determine the accessibility of a PDF file. So what you do is upload your PDF to the Pave reader, and it will tell you all of the things you need to fix to make your PDF accessible. So if you know anything about accessibility, you know that it's the buzzword these days where online learning is concerned, because we have to make sure that all students have opportunity to engage in the learning process. And so, for example, if a student is hearing impaired, you have to make sure that videos provide captioning or a transcript of some sort. If a student is visually impaired, you have to make sure that you're using fonts and text styles that allow a screen reader to interpret that material properly for the student. And so Pave is just one of those neat little tools that I've come across that helps with that process by allowing you to see what accessibility issues a PDF file that you might have created might have. Zamzar, you know, the website doesn't look like much. It looks like something that might get you in trouble with your credit card, but actually it's quite useful. So I use it to take my PDFs and create an audio version so that students who are visually impaired can, quote, listen to the page. Hindawi is another great resource that I use in my courses, STEM and technical. This STEM has the world's largest repository of peer-reviewed, fully open access journals, research articles. So I engage my students by having them read and review research articles, and we use Hindawi because through them those articles are free. So now I'll spend a few minutes talking about how you can get involved. How can you begin to embrace and incorporate open education resources so that you give those students who might have some challenges the same learning opportunity as those students who don't have those kinds of challenges. So I'll just, stress the fact and remind my fellow faculty members out there that, we don't have a whole lot of control over a lot of fees and costs of the learning environment. We can't control room and board. We can't influence the cost that students might incur to get to and from campus. But what we can influence and affect change in is the cost for books and supplies that students have to have when they step into our classroom. And so if you want to begin the process of utilizing and engaging with open materials, first thing I would advise you to do is take a look. Take a look utilizing some of the sources that I've shared with you to see what kinds of materials they actually have out there that might be useful to you. If you feel so inclined, if you find something that is really good and you want to tell the world, or something that's really bad and you want to tell the world about it, write a review. If the resource meets your needs, adopt it. Raise awareness. Talk with your colleagues in your programs and departments. And if you want to do like me, try to raise awareness around the world, around the, in the education world, if you will. Remember, we're doing this because it's all about the student. We want to create an environment where students have an equitable learning experience, meeting them where they have need regarding the learning materials that you utilize in your course. Creating an environment where every student has everything they need to be functional in your class day one. So if you have any questions for me, don't hesitate to reach out to me. I've provided my email address. I'm happy to engage. I'm happy to help anybody who's ready to step into the OER world. I'm more than willing to help you in any way that I can. Thank you for taking the time to engage with me today, and I look forward to hearing from you. Take care.